Good evening, everyone. How are we today? This evening? Nice to see you. Hiya, John. Hiya, Clive. Oh my goodness, James, we are privileged. Welcome. Hiya, glad to see you again.
Hi,
Can
Rob.
I ask those who haven't put their videos on to put the videos on? We need a little bit of feedback, don't we?
Yeah, we do, we do.
How you doing, Lorraine?
I'm good, thanks, Kunle. How are you?
I am not too bad. Yeah, it seems that spring is in the air, doesn't it?
It
Um,
certainly does. We've had a job catching each other, haven't we?
yeah, lots of things going on. Lots and lots of things going on as people keep entering.
Yeah. Shall
So
we just let, I think, is everybody in? I can still see people
we'll
joining
just
us.
continue letting people in as they come in, but we can kick off. We've got this time.
Okay, because we're kicking off.
Yeah, we are kicking off. It's all
We're
kicking off.
kicking off.
So what's the theme for today, Lorraine?
So we thought that in the current market, it would be a really good idea to go through some basic due diligence that you should be thinking about, you should be doing really if you're buying a HMO or some HMOs, a portfolio, whatever. Because there's a lot of variety in HMO world, isn't there? There's lots of different ways of buying HMOs, lots of different sizes of HMOs, but the due diligence basically stays pretty much the same. Would you agree?
I would agree. I would definitely agree. There are certain key things that you have to be focused on when you're purchasing your HMO in 2025, especially in 2025. And we've got a great session, haven't we, Lorraine? It's going to be
We
great
have
today.
indeed. We're going to
Yeah.
keep the same format and keep it a little bit informal and chit-chatty and fun, but hopefully with a lot of information. If anybody has got questions, then it's a good idea just to make a note and we'll do an open Q&A at the end. And maybe you'd just like to do the nice little disclaimer.
Yes. Disclaimer. Well, I certainly am not. I don't know about you, Lorraine, but I am not a trainer.
No, oh well.
Yeah, this is not training. This is us sharing the benefit of our experience, sharing our journeys. We're not telling anyone what to do. We always recommend seeking the professionals, including the professional trainers. But we do have quite a bit of experience, and we're happy to share with you. Um, Today, the whole idea, about this sort of due diligence process is that in our community we get a lot of, a lot of back and forth. People are inquiring, they see opportunities, and they're looking and asking a lot of common questions. And I think it's important that we really get under the bonnet and look and turn the thing upside down, shake it, where are the cobwebs, open the can of worms, and really understand what you're buying before you get into it. But perhaps the first thing right at the beginning of all of this is your strategy. Do you agree, Lorraine?
Totally agree because there are lots of possible strategies, as we've kind of said. There are lots of possible strategies to pursue. So it's really what do you want, isn't it? But there will be key factors for deciding your strategy. That's where you've got to start, isn't it? I think that was what
Absolutely.
on the training I had a picture of a little girl in front of a sweet shop. And it was like, there's so much to choose from. Where do I go? Where do I start? But you do need to get clear on your strategy, don't you? And so what would you say are the key factors, Kunle, for deciding your strategy?
Yeah. Oh, thank you, Lorraine. Good question.
You're you're welcome.
So, I mean, I think there are four key things, right? So my strategy is very different from yours, Lorraine, right? And we
Totally.
both
Yeah.
know that, and that's great.
Yeah.
But if you're someone coming into this and you hear about BTL, you hear about property investment, you hear about HMOs, you're like, oh, okay, great. And then, you go onto Rightmove and you're like a kid in the candy store and you're thinking, what do I do? And I think there are four key factors in sort of establishing how you're going to approach buying a an HMO. Now, number one is really around location, not in terms of the HMO, but in terms of some people have called it your sort of golden
Your gold
area.
mine, the gold
Yeah,
mine area.
gold mine area, golden area, and that is one thing. But actually, thinking slightly more into that, what do you know about the area? Who do you know in the area that can help you to kind of really analyze? I'm as you know, I'm developing a 50-bed HMO, and it's actually about 2,000 miles away from where I am right now. Okay, or like 3 hours drive from from my house in Slough, right? So but that's fine because I'm comfortable with that, and I know why it's part of my strategy. So you really have to understand how you intend to manage and do all of these things in the context of your location. And as I mentioned, the second thing is expertise. Right? What's your expertise that you're bringing in? You might
Mm.
be a valuer. You might be someone who does, fire risk assessments. You might have your own specialty that you can bring in. But who are the other people that can contribute to you to be able, for you to establish the strategy. So you might know some valuers who actually do really good minimos, right? And they've got loads of experience and they can share maybe old reports and can give you some idea of the area. So the expertise that you're bringing in and your team are bringing in. And capital, right? How much capital do you have? Do you
Really
have
important. You
nothing? If
defining
you
your
have nothing,
strategy
doesn't
and
mean, sorry?
yeah, really important point, Kunle. Yeah.
Absolutely. But just because you don't have any capital at hand at the moment doesn't mean you can't have access to the capital, to the right level of capital. But what level of capital do you have? And is it viable? And therefore, do you want to buy minimos or do you want to buy 5, 6 bed or do you want to buy, a portfolio or, how do you want to do that? What's your level of income? And the final one, I mean, all of these are linked, but the final one is really partners, right? So if you have a certain type of expertise or a certain type of personality, you might have someone that that might be based in that location, or maybe not, but they're complementary to you. That you think, okay, it would be great to partner with this person, and because they think slightly different from me, then I know that when we're conducting due diligence, they'll ask questions that I might not think of. So those are the four key things in deciding the strategy. Obviously, for me, my personal strategy, I look for things that have current income, yeah, that are already income bearing, and they're ready to go to a certain extent, but also that I know I add value. That's because, and as many of you know, I have no capital. It's all stuck in this project. So the projects I'm looking for are ones that I can bring capital from over there, bring knowledge from over there, and do it for these sort of, as you know, sui generis. And the location is in certain pockets, metropolitan, not large metropolitan kind of, and where there's a concentration but not an over concentration, and ideally Article 4. Yeah, so that's my sort of strategy and that's my approach. But yours is very different, Lorraine, isn't it?
Yeah, it's kind of different, but not so different. I mean, I'm similar to you in that even though I've been investing in HMOs for 10 years, I was also living a long, long way away, like a 12-hour drive up until, a couple of years ago. I was investing remotely as well. So that determined my strategy to some extent because I wasn't going to be on the ground at all. And then I just don't have certain skills. I have no DIY skills whatsoever, really, not at all. So I needed to find my team too, to build around me to fit with my skills. So as far as the HMO strategy itself, yeah, we've always stayed under the sui generis. Um, and we do a rinse and repeat. We know the returns that we're looking for. We know the cash flow that we're looking for. And so we're very focused on what we're actually going to be viewing and offering on. Have you got
Oh,
family around
company.
you, Kunle?
The girls are
Like,
there. Sorry to distract you.
kids, bedtime. But yeah, so let's jump into what we think, regardless of your strategy, which we're saying is your number one starting point, isn't it?
Absolutely.
What you said, location, expertise, capital, partners, define your strategy. But regardless, we've kind of identified four key areas of due diligence, haven't we?
Absolutely, yeah. Again, it's four key areas. Those four key areas are sort of market analysis of the location or neighborhood,
Yeah,
uh, financial viability, um, legals, and the physical condition. And
yeah.
so we take turns in going through them, Lorraine.
Let's do that. Shall we do our kind of top tip format? Shall I kick off with
Absolutely.
basically on the market analysis and location, I would say, I mean, most of us have actually come through the Insight community, not all, but the location criteria that kind of Aaron gives in his 6 Cs are very similar to what I agree with, i.e., a minimum population of 80,000 for me is quite a big one. I wouldn't want to be investing in tiny little areas where it's just a little bit more risky, I find. And I would want the in the location for the HMOs to be reasonably near to the city centres so that the my tenants can walk into town or walk into work if they need to. So I'm looking at local amenities, I'm looking at economic hubs. It might not be a city centre if my profile is tenants, it might be universities. Um, and I'm looking at local employment and employers. I don't want it to be dependent on one employer. Um, so, so, so that would be my first point, if you like. The second kind of top tip or point for me would be getting really clear on the demand and the supply within my patch, my gold mine area. I want to be 100% sure that there's a strong market for tenants, that there is demand. I want to know what kind of profile those tenants are. I mean, there's only three main categories, really, isn't there? There's like students, workers, be that white collar or blue collar, or benefit tenants. So I want to know the profile of the tenants, where the demand is. And how am I going to find out that? Well, I can use spare room to assess that to some extent. I can look at the people who are looking for rooms to find out their profile. I can also see the number of people looking for rooms, although I find that to be very high level, and it does change with the market. But obviously, again, like you're always going back, Kunle, to speak to the experts. I want to be talking to HMO letting agents. I want to be
Mm.
talking to HMO investors and landlords in the area to really assess the demand. And then similarly, on the supply side, I want to know that there's not an oversaturation of HMOs in the area that I'm investing in. So again, how am I going to do that? I was thinking about this. I guess we know our area so well, we maybe don't do the full due diligence, if you like, on this. But I think what I would probably do, I don't know what you think, but I would probably refer to, there's two ways. I could refer to council records, for
Mm.
example, the HMO register, and I could narrow it down to the area, the postcode that I'm wanting to buy in, and I could then see how many licensed HMOs there are in that area. Obviously, that won't bring up the four beds, but that will give me a good idea. And also, I think we very briefly discussed a couple of days ago, didn't we, the property mapping tools that are available, where
Mm.
on a heat map, not a heap mat, but a map, you can see the HMOs pinpointed, can't you?
Yes.
I know, as far as I know, you can't do that on Property Filter or Prop Marker, but you suggested that you can do that on Nimbus and Property Data, maybe, is it?
Yes, Searchland and
And
Nimbus
Searchland, right?
certainly
Yeah,
certainly
yeah,
do them on. Yeah,
yeah,
and it's good to have it. It's always a balance, isn't it, Lorraine? It's good to have a
yeah,
balance. You want a concentration so you know the market's there. But if it
yeah,
gets too concentrated, then you
yeah,
get oversaturated. So you need to know
yeah,
that. Again, talking
definitely.
to the experts is key.
And then the third point on that on the market analysis, Again, comes down to talking to people in the know and getting really clear on the planning and the licensing restrictions in the area that I want to invest in. Like it's for me, it's like you need to be 100% knowledgeable on both the planning side and the licensing side for your area. We will come back to this, I think, in another point, but you do need to know 100% for sure where the Article 4 areas are, where the conservation areas are, where the selective licensing. So that for me is, again, part of that due diligence on your location market analysis. Have I
Well
covered
said, Lorraine.
the three main areas, I think? Yeah,
Yeah, those are fantastic top tips. Thank you so much.
you're
Um,
welcome.
I think my response to that is that because I'm about to go into the next thing, and but just to say to everyone that it can be daunting, but it's a bit like
Mm,
a muscle, right? The more you do it, yeah, the more you find the
mm,
little gotchas, the more you talk to people in the know, the quicker it gets, right? Because ultimately, if you set your direction, your strategy, then okay, I want 4-bed minimums in metropolitan areas just outside of Article 4. Then you've got your
mm.
criteria, you've got your strategy. You can just, as you mentioned, stick everything in a heap. So
Yeah.
shut the stuff out that doesn't apply.
Sorry,
Sorry.
on the demand and supply and looking at where the HMOs are located, I did forget to mention that you need to get really familiar with your area. So you also need to know which are the good streets and which aren't the good streets, which are
Mm.
the areas where there's more crime, where there's less crime. There's loads of tools for finding that out, isn't there? Even platforms like Nextdoor, you can find out. But I mean, best of all is probably walking the streets too, isn't it? And getting really familiar with the areas that are a little bit more dodgy than others. That's really, for me, that's super, super important too. You need to be, location, location, location.
Exactly, without doubt. I would find whoever the local expert or person in the know, someone's invested already. And if I can't be there
Mm.
with them, I might get them to, ask them,
Yeah,
buy them lunch and get them to go, right?
yeah.
There are tools where I have in the past, and I've done this for holiday lets and service accommodations as well as HMOs, where I'll get a report. I'll get someone to actually go and visit and get a report and send me that. And if it's looking
Mm.
good, then the next stage will I'll get someone who knows or lives relatively close by. I've had some people in our community drive a whole hour, thank you very much, Petter, to see a prospect and give me their opinion. And that's the second level. And then the third one is either visit myself or have a second visit and then, move it forward. So there are
Mm.
levels and there are layers in terms of, seeking this perfect deal and doing your due diligence. And just because, again, another thing, just because it has a downside doesn't necessarily kill the deal. It just sets the price.
Yes.
And that
Yeah,
leads me
yeah.
nicely into the next point, which is
Numbers.
the numbers.
The numbers. So
And
important.
financial viability is so key, right? Isn't it? And you need to understand so many different things, but ultimately, does it stack? And it might stack for your strategy if for example, when I first set up my business, I thought seriously of just calling it 8%, and literally we call it 8% limited because I'm like, I would be overjoyed with 8% net returns. I would be
Mm,
overjoyed. And I have stuck hundreds of thousands into things. I'm thinking now, oh God, if only I knew this is a decade ago, right? Because then, I'd be looking not for 8%, I'd probably be looking for infinity percent, where I am
mm,
now, because
mm.
you want all your cash out. So um, what are the tools? What we should do, Lorraine, thinking off the hoof, is we should get like a standard HMO deal stack template. I know some trainers do, but we should have our own branded one. Guys, let us know if you're interested, or we'll put a link somewhere in the
Yeah, interesting. Yeah.
just because there are only a finite number of factors, right? What's the income? what are the expenses, the likely expenses, um, how you're gonna manage the thing once when so income versus expenses, you know what your sort of gross profit is. Um, and then so have you got an accountant to talk about the different factors? And we have accountants. I'm looking at one right now, who are experts who will be able to advise you. So it's always good to go to the experts. But if you have in your mind, I want this certain return, I want to make sure that it has this certain capital appreciation over time, etc. Put it into a spreadsheet. I recommend it, and then go through those numbers. Go through the numbers. Be very conservative and run through different things. But you know, um, rental projections, I would again be conservative. What's the likely occupancy for it? What's the actual if you're buying it with vacant possession, that's one thing. If you're buying it, and again, as I said, I buy things that are ongoing concerns. So what are they actually gaining now? What's the passing rent, which is the sort of gross rent? And all of these different factors. What are the maintenance costs? What are the maintenance costs that the people who currently own it aren't telling you? Because they'll always be really optimistic. Oh, it only costs 10% of the rent, and your profit
All
is
the all the utilities. Oh no, the gas and electrics doesn't cost anything hardly. Sure.
This
Can
is
I
true.
see that,
I
please?
mean, we the property we acquired in Coventry, they refused to send us the utility bills.
Oh,
Um,
really?
I mean, again, it's a risk, and you're like, oh my God,
Yeah.
I went wrong. But you can make an educated guess. And there are reasons why people might refuse to send you bits of information. But you need to know that that they're motivated sellers. And again,
Mm.
we'll touch upon that later on. But the financial viability is, I think, it's related to what kind of returns you're looking for. But
Totally.
it absolutely needs to stack. So get yourselves a bunch of KPIs that you just know, right? What is it that you're looking for?
And it's really interesting, Kunle, isn't it? Because like what you're looking for on your financials is probably very different to what we look for. So we've just been rinse and repeat from the beginning. We want to cash flow £200 net per room, and we want a 30% ROI. Okay, we're kind of settling for 25 in this market, but there's a lot of different opportunities. But we've kind of been pretty much the same rinse and repeat on our financials from the beginning because we're so honed into our strategy. And it's actually really helpful, whatever your strategy is, because it allows you to focus and filter on deals. You just run the numbers through, run the numbers through. No, that doesn't work. It doesn't work. I don't know. What do you think?
Totally. I mean, totally agreeing with that. I with the onset of age, you can see with the grey hairs, you can be a bit flexible if you've defined those variables, those four
Yeah,
variables. So for this property, right, because it's in that location, yeah,
yeah,
I might think, well, the return isn't that good, but I know the capital
mm,
appreciation will be.
yeah, yeah,
So
yeah,
I'm not going to make any money for the first 2 years, but I really like that location. I think I can refinance it
yeah,
well,
yeah.
and then be better in 2 years' time. Or there's different variables that you can bring to bear in terms to making
Okay. Yeah.
financially viable. But the fact that you can instantly say these are our KPIs that we look for.
Mm.
Um, is key, and I think it's critical. Don't be in dismay if you can't do a Lorraine, right? Lorraine is very experienced, has been doing this a long time, but ultimately that's what you want for every deal, to know your KPIs and know what you're looking for.
Yeah, and you definitely need to know what if especially if you're refinancing straight out as that strategy, you might be or you might not, but you must know what end values are. You must know what's achievable in your area as bricks and mortar or as commercial GDVs. I think that's super, super important. If you're not, it can sound a bit scary, but it doesn't have to be scary numbers. It might not be your thing at all. A lot of people, it isn't. but it isn't very complicated really, and you can definitely get help so that you've got a clear understanding of what you're looking for and you don't kind of get lost in all of that side. I think it looks a lot scarier than it is, really.
Mm, absolutely.
Shall
So
we move
let's,
on to number three?
yes,
Let's
indeed.
do that. We're doing well. So, number three, what we thought of as a really important part of your due diligence. Um, so, we've had the market analysis and we've had the financial viability, knowing your numbers. And then the third part that's really important is what we're going to call legal compliance. So, there's obviously different elements to this. First, if we think really in legal conveyancing terms, it's very, very important to decide if, like you, Kunle, you are happy to buy with tenants in situ, or if, like us, we prefer there not to be tenants in situ. If you're buying an existing HMO with tenants, it's obviously not a no-no, but you do need to have really strict due diligence, or your solicitor does, and you need to make sure that they are doing that due diligence on things, for example, like the existing tenancy agreements. What do they look like? Because you're going to inherit these tenancy agreements, aren't you? So the existing tenancy agreements, what do they look like? Were all the legal documents served at the beginning of the tenancy that needed to be? You know, were tenants given the gas safety, the electrical, the EPC, the how to rent documentation? Is there signed proof that they received those documents? Because should you have to evict somebody, you will need that. And then not only those documents, but then there's the referencing. Have you got the referencing that was done for the existing tenants? Because you will want to know their background. You will want to decide if you're happy to keep the property with those tenants. And also, very, very importantly, of course, but maybe not, um, could slip you if you don't think about it, but are they all completely up to date with their rent? Because you don't really want to be taking on HMOs with tenants who are in arrears, do you? You
Mm,
want to have a nice, clean bill of health for all your tenants. So yeah, due diligence in that respect is really important. Hopefully you will be led by your solicitor, but they are things that you need to be looking out for sure. And then the other big areas for me for compliance, legal compliance, are licensing and planning. So we often find, don't we, that people mix these things together because maybe in some smaller councils, the licensing and the planning department are combined, but in most bigger councils, licensing and planning, they are two separate departments totally, and they don't necessarily speak to each other. So you've got licensing on the one hand. So as we know, 5+ needs a HMO license. But not only is the property you're buying got a license, but when was the license last issued? Because a lot can happen in 5 years, and your council might have changed the size of the rooms that they want, the size of the shared area. For example, in Leicester, when we started to buy HMOs, if they were students in the property, then the HMO licensing didn't require the bedrooms to have fire doors or hardwired smokes, because licensing went under the assumption that students living together, a bit crazy in my opinion, they're thinking, but if students were living together and there was a fire, then they would warn each other and all get out safely. So you didn't need fire doors. But if there were tenants, separate tenancies for each room, and people didn't know each other, then you needed fire doors because they wouldn't tell each other. So, which was quite crazy because you could have like students in one year and then working professionals in the next year, but your property's got fire doors or it hasn't. Anyway, that has all now changed in licensing, but it's important to know these things because if you've got extra costs of, fitting fire doors retrospectively, hardwired smokes, you want to bring all of that into your numbers, don't you? Into your deal analyzer. So
Yeah.
yeah, licensing, looking at past licenses, seeing when they were issued, seeing if anything's changed, being really clear on what is required for licensing in that area. You can't assume anything at all. You must get sight of, in my opinion, written evidence of what is required for licensing. It should be online, but as we've seen recently in the chat, it's not always for certain areas, but you will get to the bottom of it if you speak to licensing. So licensing, and then the other thing, obviously, is planning, that we've spoken about quite a lot in the past. On our last session, we did a whole session on Article 4, so we're not going to go on about it too much tonight. But for me, the top tip there always remains, if you are buying in an Article 4 area, make sure you've got a certificate of lawfulness before you purchase your HMO because your lender will want it. So, um, kind of in rookie terms, that just means that if you are buying an existing HMO in an Article 4 area, you will need to be able to prove the right to have a HMO in that area when you purchase it. So you will need to be able to prove the tenancies that show it was multi-let. And the piece of paper you get from planning is an LDC, certificate of lawfulness, or a lawful development certificate. Usually takes about 3 months to get, but you can get it while the conveyancing's going on, and it just covers you for that. Again, we have spoken about this a lot in the past, so I won't go on too much about it, but it is just super important these days.
It is absolutely key. I think when it comes to engaging with the various different departments within the council, it helps to just be nice. You might be stuck on
Yeah,
the phone for 45 minutes and then be going around from one department to the other to the same one. But you just have to remember when you finally get that person, be really nice. And if you are, they can be engaging. They'll give you ideas, and there's this phenomenal amount of information. The other thing
totally.
just to
Yeah.
say is that I go to in Nottingham, I think it was, there were networking events held by the local council. So just try and
Mm.
go out of your way. I had to drive a couple of hours each way, but do it, attend and meet the person, shake hands. And that was a way that I met someone who I did a lot of business with and rented out a lot of properties to over many years. But if I hadn't been to that event and shook that person's hand and given my card, that would never happen. So be nice and try and find networking events.
Yeah, I think that's a really brilliant point that you've made there, Kunle. It is so good when you've got good contacts with the council and with licensing and planning. It just changes everything because they, at the end of the day, they want you to have good homes as much as
Mm,
as you do. So they really want to work with, landlords that are trying their best. So they're going to be there to help you. That has changed things massively for us, especially on the licensing front. Like we ask for the same licensing officer each time now for inspections and
nice.
renewals, and she likes to take our cases all the time because she's used to working with us. She knows what standards she's going to get, and we were all very happy. But the same they used to have, I'm not sure they're doing them at the moment still, but like council meetings to try and help landlords to inform them. So they are brilliant things to go along to. Definitely
Absolutely.
a good tip that.
Great. And number four, shall I take number four?
Yes, number 4, our last area of due diligence. Go for it,
Thank you,
Kunle.
Lorraine. Property, last but not least,
The
property
house.
condition.
The house itself.
Exactly. What is the
Yeah.
physical condition of the house itself? What are you looking for? What should you be looking for? Why is this important? Well, you know, for me, it's important because it's the exit, right? And again, if you go into a house that is a complete disaster, actually, is that not an opportunity? If you can point out all the areas that are terrible and you know that you can fix them, then there's value to be added. So for me, it's important because it's the exit, right? I do quite a few refurbs. So if I go into something and I know I've seen that problem before and I know who can fix it and help me fix it, then great. Obviously, when I
Mm.
first started out, I'd go into a house. I went into one house I bought and there was damp, and I'm like, well, is it me? But that wasn't in there 3 weeks ago. Someone had just painted over it, and it just, and I had to find the right people, understand about it, and okay, I survived it. I might have lost money, it might have been expensive, but you put that into your bank, and you have all the contacts, and you grow stronger, and then can you deal with damp in the future? So again, prior warning, there is a lot that you will have to think of, and there's always something. You're refinancing or you're trying to finance this acquisition, and they ask for a mining report or something that you haven't thought of, and it is frustrating. So
Or a VAT report.
Sorry.
A VAT report.
Exactly, Batroll.
We won't start on that.
Let's not go there. Newts. So look, I've got the top 20 common ones. I think is it 20? I don't know how many, but I'm just going to reel them out very
The
quickly.
different reports that you might
There are
have to
so
look
many
at.
things that are reports that you might, don't think that you have to. You can quite easily ask for these. Yeah. So you just literally ask for all the reports and then you're putting it into, especially if you have a motivated seller, then maybe they'd be willing to make that report. Or maybe you just make, over time, you're like, do I really need a mining report? Probably not. Can I get hold of one if I really need to? Yeah, fine. So I'm going to just run through them very quickly. Asbestos report, asbestos management plan, fire risk assessment, fire alarm certificate, maintenance, emergency lights, gas certificate, electrical condition report, subsidence, damp issues, roof and loft inspection, subsidence, HHSRS. Sorry?
You said subsidence. It's okay. You can't count
I said it already. No,
Yeah.
sorry. HHSRS. I should have put them out in alphabetical order. HHSRS stands for health and safety. I can't remember what the actual thing is.
Housing Health and Safety Rating System, I believe.
Rating system, exactly. Which actually, top tip about that. In Coventry, I got the HMO inspector to come round. I think it cost 150 or 200 quid at the time. And they wrote a report on this HMO I was going to buy. And they said, oh, the kitchen needs this. Make sure when you redo it, you need to have that. And there's, you need to have a railing in this staircase, blah, blah, blah. And that they basically did it. For me, it was great to have that written with the HMO officer, but it was also a free HHS.
Yeah.
And the other thing if you join Dash, I think is it Dash or Class? They do that. They come out and do an report for you. Health and safety is really important. Plumbing and drainage inspection, window condition report, structural engineers report, radon, boundary survey, site contamination, flood risk assessment, water pressure, Legionnaires. I mean, it goes on and on and on.
It goes on and on, yeah.
But if you understand Legionnaires, you'll know it's about sitting water. So you'll know a little bit what to look for. You're like, okay, there's no Legionnaires here. I'm fine. I don't need that. Right. So there is a lot that you can kind of worry about. But as I said, when you're doing your due diligence, if you have a seller that's motivated, you will see that they have a pack. And of course, when the all-important RICS independent surveyor comes, if you're ready for them, you have a nice pack, you've got all the title documents, you've got all the flood risk assessment, whatever you have, and you just present it to them with a nice smile, hope it's a nice sunny day, all of that kind of stuff. it's going to help your Rick's survey report. Why? Because it's not an AI that's coming to look at the house. It's a human. It's living, breathing flesh, human being, and therefore they can be swayed a little bit. They're supposed to be always
Yeah.
very independent and all of that. But if you make your life easier for them, then even if you're saying, oh, I want this, I think this is rated £200,000, the value, and these are the reasons. You might say, well, I disagree with you, this, and you're like, oh, but don't be crestfallen because if you've been nice to them, they might say, well, you can probably double the price if you do this, and this, right? And I've had that. So always be nice.
Yeah. So there's the beginning end, isn't there? And then there's kind of that on the exiting or refinancing. But at the beginning, you also need to be. I mean, there's leads coming in a lot at the moment, I'm finding. We'll quickly touch on the market at the moment after, won't we? But so we were at a property today looking at it from it's not a HMO, but it could easily be a HMO. But we're there in our heads calculating, well, what upgrades, what's needed for this to become a HMO? Okay, so it's going to need the fire doors, it's going to need hardwired smokes, it's going to need a metal casing on the fuse box. If you know what you're going to have to do, then you can cost it quite effectively as well, can't you? From the outset.
And we've got in our community, we've got quantity surveyors and we've got a lot of
We've got
expertise who do
yeah,
developers. And we regularly have questions. How much does it cost to install an ensuite in, Scunthorpe?
yeah, yeah,
And it's great to be able to share that information and say, well, okay,
yeah,
we've done one, quite close by, and this is what let's look up this person.
yeah,
So all of these things are important. And as you said, start with the end in mind. It's the
yeah.
exit. And it's always good to have a contingent, one or two contingent.
Yeah. And then a really important Cunley, but we won't have time for it this evening. I guess it would almost be a subject by itself, is the EPC, isn't it? And
But I
understanding.
mean, that was one thing I'm definitely touching upon. If I can
Mm,
take a minute, I think the EPC is critical nowadays. So we had a property today. We couldn't understand why the asking price was so high. We're probably not going to go for it because we don't think they're motivated, and if we think they need to, understand a bit of reality, so we think we might get hold of it later on this year. But the reason why is because they've done quite a lot of work on the structure and the EPC.
mm,
And well, they said they'd done a lot of work on the fire risk, but we disagreed with them. But it's absolutely critical to understand your energy efficiency. Why? Well, because it's your running costs. Yeah, utilities, right? So how energy efficient is it? How well insulated is it? Um, Now, where, as I've said before, I'm not necessarily a tree hugger. I do think it's the right thing to do to try and be, energy efficient and be concerned about the environment. I've got my daughters, and I want to, it's a legacy I want to give
the
to the
planet and the
next
generation
generation.
and the
However, but as HMO landlords, we're responsible for the energy, and therefore it's your bottom line. So
mm.
it only makes sense, I think.
It does, but I think sorry, I mean, this could be a long discussion, so I won't go there, but I do find it a little bit random. I mean, the HMO, the house that we looked at today was at A rating, simply because it got solar panels on the roof. I'm sorry, but
Now that the
it's a
whole
little bit ad
EPC thing,
hoc. Sorry.
the whole EPC thing is actually a scandal.
Mm,
And again, as I said before, with the RICS independent surveyors, I
mm,
think a lot of these EPC assessors um, are they're not doing their job, or they're marking. I mean, there's no way something like that should be an A, right? Just because of solar panels. Obviously there are deficiencies in the system, so we're putting
mm.
infrared heating strips on the ceilings
Yeah,
of one
yeah,
of our developments, which are great, but
yeah.
it's just seen as part of electrical heating, rather than really efficient, really, energy
Okay.
efficient.
Yeah,
There's
yeah,
no there's no category for it,
yeah, yeah,
which
yeah.
means effectively we're being penalized for our EPC. even though we're making that investment to
Yeah.
be energy efficient.
I think
So
it's a great opportunity, Kunle, because lots of people are selling because they're a bit scared of the EPC stuff.
absolutely. I think that there's a gap there and there are quick wins, right? So
Mm,
if you see something, so for example, the place might have an EPC. In fact, we've got one place that we're about to acquire with an EPC of G for golf.
oh, wow.
Which, I've looked at it and I'm like, it's fine. What all you need is, so, and then we read the EPC report, and it's not got gas, which is actually good for EPC reports. So we
Yeah.
upgrade the electric storage heaters, and we put, 100 mil batons with insulation and insulated plasterboard, and then repaint, a couple of
Mm,
days back. And we know we could do that, yeah, but we're probably going to get a 40K discount for that house, because it's got EPG
because it's a G, yeah, G for golf.
and the final thing, we're not going to take any more time,
No,
but the
we're not
final
gonna,
thing
yeah.
is it will affect how you refinance. When we last
Yes.
did a bridge, if you are exiting, then their exit for the bridge
Yeah.
is 3%. It starts at 3%. But if
Yeah.
you're exiting and your EPC is A, then it goes
You
down.
get you get
So
preferential
this is
rates.
and for that particular one, this is for the big one. That exit rate, I mean, I think we're saving
Made
at
a huge
least
difference.
200K, at least
Wow.
200K on that because that's obviously a big one and it's a big
Yeah,
project.
yeah, yeah. No, but it can
Um,
make a difference.
but you can save up to 2% with this particular bridging lender.
Yeah.
So these, it's not just talk. EPCs are very, very important, especially for the
Hmm.
exit.
Yeah. Okay, but we won't go any further with the EPC conversation this evening because we're doing quite well. Um, shall we wrap it up and open Q&A? Or I know we wanted to touch a tiny bit on the market right now, it being a buyer's market. What do you
Yeah,
think?
I mean, I think it's important. So
It
um,
is.
2025, right here, right now, is very different to a year ago. It's very different to 5 years ago. We know.
Totally.
Um, but I think that the fact that it is a buyer's market right now will probably stay in the next few months and for most of 2025. What is a buyer's market? A buyer's market is very simple. Buyer's market is where the conditions are better for the buyer rather than for the seller. And um, if there are many opportunities out there, and therefore you're trying to sell, and you are in fact a seller, and there's lots of competition, then your price tends to go down, and that is good for buyers. What are the factors in 2025 that are affecting and creating a buyer's market? Well, um, number one short-term factor is for the whole of Q1, people have been trying to sell just to avoid the stamp duty increase that are coming in place on the 1st of April. That's just one of the considerations. Another consideration is the fact that the onset of regulation, I'm hearing a lot of political stuff about, for example, the incumbent, Labour government. Um, and whilst I agree, I mean, I'm a Labour voter myself. No bones, no quarrels about that. People might think I'm a traitor for being a wealthy landlord. The Labour voter always have, always will. But the Renters' Rights Bill, which is about to become an act, was introduced by the Tories, right? And I think
Mhm,
it's not a political point that the politicians will be beating on the landlords, right?
mhm, mhm.
And I'm also a developer, so they sort of say they give on one hand and they'll take away on the other hand because developers are supposedly wanted. But again, I think it's a very tough market for developers. So the onset of regulation, not just the Renters' Rights Act that's coming into place, but over probably the last decade, has meant
There's
a
been a
lot of
lot.
people. Sorry.
There's been a lot, hasn't there?
Has
There's been a
been
lot
a
of extra
lot,
compliance
absolutely.
and regulations.
Absolutely, a lot of people want to get out, and for me,
Mm,
I buy portfolios. So when you're talking to certain generations, some of them my age, I'm thinking, where? I'm a bit long in the tooth now. Maybe I should be doing what that guy's doing. I have said that to some of my business partners, but I've got probably a decade left myself. But people want to get out and they're willing to say, okay, well, actually, let me finance this sale to you, right?
Mm,
And the other kind of market indicator is 25 is still the back end of the sort of macro interest rates, uh,
mm,
which spiked in 2023, um, took us all by surprise. I'm one of those that they all, you know, took out 5-year deals in between 2019 and 2021, 5 years,
mm.
you know, that 3%.
Yeah, they're all
And
coming to an end for a lot
I
of
used to,
people.
exactly.
Still now, aren't they? We're
I
seeing
was
that.
coming out of 5-year, 5% deals into 3% deals, thinking, "Oh my God, how could I have paid 5% for that?" You know,
Mm,
and now I'm coming, and now
mm,
reality is hitting, and I'm thinking, "Oh my God!" And I'm doing deals at 6%, 7%, but still viable deals. But
yeah.
people are coming out of that and realizing, refinancing, thinking, "Well, you know what? You know, the combination of all those things, and they want to sell." So there are a lot of deals in the marketplace. That's why I think something like a session like this is really useful because get your due diligence right. Find a motivated seller. What do you think, Ray?
Yeah, definitely. No, it's definitely a buyer's market has become one, and I don't know, it just you can feel the shift there, can't you? I don't know, we feel it because people are bringing us leads for properties to buy or guaranteed rent projects as well, which we're still very open to when the numbers work. But the number of leads is multiplying, which is great,
Hmm.
brilliant.
Is that both for your landlords coming in as well as your renters?
Is that for the landlords coming
The
in as
motive,
well as?
yeah, the motivated sellers. I mean, do you have? I mean, you're a
Yeah.
seller in terms of the rental side of things. So how are you seeing that? Because I think what you just said,
Yeah,
your
we're
landlords.
seeing, yeah, we're
Yeah,
seeing landlords on because for a long time you couldn't pick up good guaranteed rent properties because the single let rents were higher than what you could give as a guaranteed rent agent. But we're seeing now on the larger properties, landlords who are reducing their rent. I mean, I'm talking 5 bed, 5, 6 bed. They're
yeah,
reducing their rent. They're no longer getting the 1,800 or however much they were getting for a family or an extended family. They're reducing their rents, so they're coming back into the guaranteed rent market, which is interesting. and
okay.
and it's negotiable. It's the a guy we saw today, it's negotiable. We're not going to take it because it's not perfect. Well, it doesn't have to be perfect, but it's not quite good enough, so we'll wait for another, but whereas before you were chasing those leads, that you can feel the shift. You can feel the shift.
Hmm. And you know, will that continue in 25? What are the market factors
Mm,
that will change? It would be interesting to see what people think. So,
yeah.
shall we open it up to questions, Ray?
Let's go for Q&A, and let's open up for Q&A for 5 or 10 minutes, depending on who's got what. Have we got anything in the chat that we need to
We
respond
have, but
to?
is anyone who's on the
Any
screen got any comments or questions?
burning? Yeah, just raise your hand, and either
Okay, so I
physically
can
or
see
via
Helen.
the
Sorry, you
yeah, they
go.
can either raise their hand physically or with a little emoji.
I saw Helen first, and I can see James as well. So those two. So Helen, welcome. I think you actually put stuff in the chat as well.
Yeah, I saw stuff coming in.
I've asked you to unmute. There you go. Good
Hi,
Hello.
evening.
Helen.
Hi. I did put a couple of questions in the chat. The first one is, has anyone had any dealings with a HMO, leasing a HMO to NACRO? Any advice on leasing to a company and anything to be mindful of?
Nacro,
Na-
is that a criminal ex-convict kind of
It
a
is,
thing?
yes. And
Right.
it would be ex-prisoners.
And for what kind of length of time?
They didn't really say,
Right.
not yet anyway.
To be honest, I've never done it myself. In Nottingham, I was contacted or passed through to someone, but I never bought the property. Um, First of all, I mean, I don't know how you feel about that, but personally, I feel that's a great thing to do. You know, obviously,
Mm.
from a business perspective, it has to be about the business, but I think that's a great kind of way of giving back. And if it works out, who knows, maybe that, you know, that might be your niche that you do that.
Yeah,
And, you know, it depends on the relationships. So finding the experts in the area, the people that can, you know, understanding what the market is. I imagine the market would be quite stable, right? Especially with Labour releasing a whole lot of people early
yeah.
and the prisons being full.
We we have
But
spoken to them briefly at the Landlords Association meeting, and they've
right.
contacted me since to say they are interested, but
So
just want
you tell me about the property.
um the property is, we were going to turn it into a four-bed HMO, but we haven't started it yet. So what they've suggested is they come round and have a look, and then if they're interested, we can do it to exactly what they want. So it does fit the criteria to what they want. It's in the area that they're happy with. So it's just
Are you using lending, Helen? Have you got lenders? Are you,
we've got a bridge on it at the moment.
because that is the one thing you would
That's a great
definitely be
point.
wanting to talk to your brokers about lending, and if there's any restrictions in that aspect at
Right.
all, if it
Yeah.
limits the market or not. I know that market is widening up, but whether there are certain restrictions for that category or
Yeah.
not, and
With
the
How long's
quality
your
of the
bridge?
lease.
the bridge is until October, is it? Yeah, October. But what we were hoping to do is finish off the HMO we're doing now, and then mortgage that because that's unencumbered, to pay
Right,
off the bridge. So either
Right.
pay off the bridge or buy something else, or a mixture of the two.
right.
So we may
So,
not have a bridge on it anyway.
so the factors you can consider, and we, you know, you can look me up, we can talk a bit more. So first of all, um, I would say to you that finance is very important, as Lorraine has said, right? So
Yeah,
Term lending,
be
yeah.
very careful. Make sure you ask those type of questions to a number of brokers and
uh,
test them out. Talk to the NACRO people. They might know either brokers or you know, financiers
Lenders, yeah.
that can help you, right? That have experience and that can demonstrate that experience. That's the first one, finance. Number two, I think that's a great point that if you're getting them in there before you do the renovation and then you're doing it to
yeah,
their standards, because their standards will likely be similar or better than the local standards. But you know, you might be surprised, there might be less. So, for example, I bought a student accommodation. I was expecting the standards to be higher than a local borough. They were actually lower, and they were exempt from a load of things. So when I wanted to convert it to professional, I had to spend the money to kind of bring it up. So you
yeah,
have to be you have to kind of straddle both. If you're going to lease it to them for 10 years, then great. But if you're going to
yeah,
lease it to for 2 years, you might think, well, actually, if I change my mind, you want whatever.
mm,
The other
yeah,
thing is the strength of their covenant. So
Mm.
take that down. Find that, you know, understand if you're leasing it to them, what is the strength of their covenant? Ask them what that is. Ask them, you know, how they could prove that, because that's going to be a key consideration for the RICS valuer to try
And
and
for the lenders for the mortgage as well. Totally
right,
the lease
the RICS
terms.
valuer is hired by the lender for your
Mm.
term. Obviously, you bridged it. You're in the lender already, but for your term mortgage, they're going
Mm.
to hire a RICS valuer, and he's going to want to understand that the strength of that covenant of NACRO. If they're government backed, then that's great. If they're, you know, an independent and they're not such a strong company and they don't have strong financials and strong cash
mm,
capital, etc. So try and understand that, and also try and make it a full rent and insurance, full repair and insurance, an FRI lease. Yeah, make sure it's an FRI lease, so you basically give it to them and they're responsible. You know, so you spend a lot of money to bring it to a certain state, and they have to
mm,
give it back to you in exactly that state. So they have to redecorate, make sure it's in there when they hand it back to you.
I'm
But
sure
I
they
would,
said it was. I'm sure they said it was.
yeah, and don't skimp on your legals.
No.
Right? It might be a pain, it might be expensive, but don't skimp on it. Don't use any dodgy little contract over whatever. Get your lawyer to make sure that the legals fully protect you. You know, you can ask in the group. A lot of people do it. They ask in the group and say, "Do you have a template? Do you have this?" And I'm reluctant to give people my template. I know some trainers do, and I'm agnostic as to whether they do that, but legals are very much specific to you. So really be very, very careful around that. Lorraine, what are your thoughts?
No, totally agree with you, 100%. Yeah, the lease terms and them being reviewed and being really, really solid are going to be, critical in that.
Absolutely.
Okay. Thank
Okay,
I
you.
so
guess
we'll come back to you. Sorry, go
yeah.
on, Lorraine.
No, I was just wondering whether you would have any concerns at all with regards to the location and your neighbours and people if you had that tenant profile, because it is what it is. It is going to be off-putting for some people, and
Mm.
that kind of needs to be acknowledged in wherever it is situated, I think. Does it fit in there or not?
It is quite close to another HMO, but it does fit their criteria. It's not near a school or a pub or a betting shop, so it is in
Yeah,
a terrace, so
yeah.
which they
Okay.
are aware of, and they don't
Yeah.
seem to have any problems with it. But as you say, the neighbours may well
Yeah.
do.
You don't want to have problems with the neighbours either,
No,
though.
no, exactly.
That is my kind
I
of
think I
line
think
of
that's why
thought there.
why he was asking as much as
Yeah,
anything is whether
yeah. If anyone sort of had any problems with that kind of thing, but really, wasn't it?
Has anyone in this group? I mean, I can see a few people on cameras. I mean, please do raise your hand and jump in. What I would say is, make sure that the insurances that they have, you see what those insurances are, right? So
Yeah,
you ask for their insurance cover, and
yeah.
you double check. What I would say is, the NACRO people would know what works, but don't just rely 100% on that. There
No.
will be people in this community who have done it. There will be people on social media or whatever that can give you their opinion on
Mm,
that. And there are clearly safeguarding concerns, right? You need to be careful that, make sure it's not close to a school and all of that.
yeah.
But that said, people, there are all sorts of people of all sorts of, shapes and sizes need to have a home and deserve to have a home. So
Okay. Yeah.
and so yeah, so it's definitely something to consider. But from a purely business perspective, look at it, as you're renting to a company, and the financial strength of that company is key as well. Okay, so let's move on. Helen, you had another question, but I'm gonna move to others to give them a
Okay.
chance. That's all right. Okay, James. Hello, sir. How are you? Good to see you.
How are you guys?
Hi, James. Good to see you.
And you. Two questions, which I hope are going to be quick. If you're buying a HMO that has an existing license, is it automatically transferred to you?
No,
No,
it's
it's
automatically
never.
not.
It's automatically not transferred to you.
Right. So what have you got to do in that instance?
Now, this is such a good question, because actually not that many people who claim to know.
We take
Right?
it for granted, don't we, that these
Yes.
things are kind of obvious, but they're not obviously obvious. But no,
So,
the
so,
license
so the
goes with the person and not the property.
absolutely the short answer, James, is on the day that you buy it, and on the day that you want to start operating it as an HMO, you make your application. And that will probably involve self-declaring yourself as a fit and proper person, or your agent self-declaring themselves as a fit and proper person to run the HMO, and then they make the application, and then then you can continue running it, and then your application will be processed in parallel. Is that right, Lorraine?
Yes, that's right. And most councils, again, you need to check with your local council, but a lot of councils, as long as your application is registered online, you can then operate from day one. Again, you just need to check it out with your local council.
Bye,
Properties
John.
come with tenants.
Sorry?
So properties can come with tenants. So
Yes.
if you need the license, then and you haven't got the license, then
So in answer, I
Yeah.
think what you're asking is, right, how can you tell it's a good place? And really, you want to see the license that exists, and you want to understand everything about those tenants and everything about the property to know that it's currently being run well. And if you're confident you can take over those operations, then everything will be fine. It's a bit of a leap of faith, but everything will be fine. If you know it's being run well, you've seen the HMO licenses and everything's in order. You might even want to phone up the HMO officer and ask them about, you know, the occupancy levels in each rooms and, you know, these kitchens and what they, you know, what needed to be done. Because licenses are a bit of an iterative process. You'll get the license, but it might be subject to certain conditions, and they'd have had to go back and check the kitchen, worktops and stuff like that. So it's fine to take on something like that. And it is a bit of a leap of faith, but that is the process. The reason why I'm saying that is, for example, I had a Rick's valuer who shall remain nameless, right? In an acquisition we did last year, who shockingly, I've always said, take control of your valuation. And Christos is laughing because we did this together, right? Take control of your valuation. I interviewed all the, you know, potential valuers, talked to this one. She'd done HMOs in the area. She had experience, all of that. She came and she wrote up the RICS report, gave the valuation, and she said, I recommend that you do not lend to the borrower until they have an HMO license. Yeah. Now, this was our acquisition in Coventry, and Coventry normally respond in 2 years. I think they're slightly better because I think we just had a response just about a year, just over a year since we made our application. But for a RICS valuer who's supposed to know what they do, to say do not lend, so we need to, you know, you're not going to lend to us until like a year and a half, 2 years after we bought it. You don't know what you're talking about. So it's unfortunate that, you know, and the bank even acknowledged it. We're like, she doesn't know what she's talking about. They're like, okay, we'll just ignore that bit, and they still lent us the money because they knew the process. But it is a bit of a leap of faith, James.
I think, James, my understanding is you're wondering from a logistic point of view, if you're buying it with the tenants in situ, then when you apply for the license, is that it? Is that where you're coming from?
in an Article 4 area,
Yeah,
and it has a license.
yeah.
So obviously, when you buy it, I wondered if the license sort of went with the property.
No, you then apply for a new license, but you will have a little bit of leeway with the council as to, you know, the changeover, because you basically apply for a new license in your name or in the agent's name, whichever way you're going, when you purchase that property.
They don't want more HMOs. They're looking to get rid of HMOs.
Oh, you're concerned that you wouldn't get the license?
Yeah.
You're not adding a net HMO into the system. It's an existing HMO. Therefore, what you want to do is understand the planning, right? As it got a certificate of lawfulness, whatever, understand the planning. If the planning is all right and everything is in place and it's being run and it's got a current HMO license, then the people who have the current HMO license, you'll ask them to write a letter to the council to say, you know, we're completing on this date. And as soon as possible after completion, you make your application, and that will be fine, and you'll be fine because you're not adding any other HMOs. It's been running and it's an existing HMO with planning within an Article 4 area. So, you know, it's a good investment from that perspective.
I think it's easy to confuse, correct me if I'm wrong, planning permission and licensing. Although it's a strange term to use, planning permission for HMOs, they do, if it's got planning permission, then that's okay for the Article 4 Licensing, you could actually correlate more to the building reg side of things. Have you got the fire doors and that sort of thing? So if your property that you're buying's licensed or lawful use as an HMO, that can't be taken away from it unless you stop using it as an HMO. The licensing is just a 5-year periodic thing that makes sure it's in good working order.
Yeah, if it's been granted planning and it's got lawful use, which is the planning side of things, whereas the HMO license it's quite often HMO licensing sits under environment. Yeah, environmental.
Yeah.
So yes, you're correct. Thank you, Clive.
But you should have no problem, but you could always just double check with the council, James, if you had that concern. But there, in theory, you wouldn't not get an HMO license if you're buying that existing HMO with the tenants in situ.
Yeah.
And you
I
both
can't hear you, James. Could you speak closer to the mic? Sorry.
Sorry, is that better or is that
Yeah.
better?
Yes.
Which
First
one? That
better.
one?
No, the
First
first
one.
one.
The first one, right?
Then I
Yeah.
can see your
It's
face.
obvious, it's not put my mic on. It's using the computer, so I'm talking to the wrong thing. So
All right.
I'll talk to something else. Sorry. Right. So, Kunle, you said about 8% profit. You were going to call yourself 8%. And Lorraine talked about £200 per room. So what I'm looking at on the profit is, are you looking at the profit after so if you bought a HMO and you had investment money in that property, not your money, yeah, you would have to pay the investor, the mortgage. So where are you looking at your profit? Are you still looking at £200 per room and 8% on top of that after all fees and all bills?
For us, yes, we're looking at £200 net per room on refinance, because our normal strategy is to buy, add value, and refinance within a 6-month period. So we will have factored those costs in, and we're looking for our net profit to be £200 a room on our own HMOs. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Sorry, I was just taking a glass of water there. I agree that it's we call it net profit. I call it gross profit because it's profit before tax, but it's basically the income minus
The net cash flow, yeah.
Yeah, your cash flow. So the income minus your expenses. What happens there? Whether or not you call it per room or overall in terms of percentage, it's the same thing, really. But 8% was great for me because I was yielding 3% for my flat in London. So I thought 8% would be great. So it's all relative. Does that answer your question, James?
Yeah.
Good to see you, mate. Did anyone else want to start? Yep, Clive.
Just a quick question that I ask somebody every 6 months. You'll recognise the question, Lorraine. If you have a licensed HMO, full planning permission, full license, everything, and you let it for 5 years or 10 years, whatever, to a care provider, and then that ends with the care provider, and you want to use it back as a normal HMO, is there a problem if that area has become Article 4? Do you lose that continuity by having it broken by a contract with a care proviber?
I think that's a really good question and a really valid point that I've had numerous discussions with the brokers about as well. I could just hear some strange noises. I think to ensure that you don't have problems, you would have it in writing from the council to say, because I think it depends to some extent how the lease is
One moment,
written.
Lorraine. Sorry. Wang, for some reason I can't mute you, but I've asked you to mute.
Is it Wang we could hear?
It's Alan, I think. Alan Whitelaw.
I have muted Alan, but I can't mute Wang. There you go.
Okay.
Sorry about that. Carry on, Lorraine.
Yeah. I think there is a bit of a grey area, and but you can make sure that it's okay with the council that it isn't broken, because in certain instances it could.
Yeah.
Because I know for in some scenarios, some councils had the same issue with students when they're all on one tenancy agreement, even though it's clear that they all are on one, that it's multi-let, it's only one tenancy agreement, but the councils are generally okay with that. But I would just make it crystal clear, because it might be that the lease with your care provider just needs to be worded a little bit differently. To show that that it's being multi-let.
I understand, but you actually don't need planning for a care provider, even if it's
No,
over 6. You
yeah,
don't need it. They have the right to
you don't need
overrule.
it.
So if I buy a house from scratch, as I have done, as you know,
Mm,
never been used as an HMO before, and use it for the very first time for a care provider, I've
yeah,
never had planning. I've
yeah,
actually never had a license, because
yeah,
I don't even need a license.
yeah,
So I'm not even asking for continuity. My
yeah,
concern is that if ever I can't let to a care provider, I may have lost the right to use it as an
yeah.
HMO if it becomes Article 4.
But
Clive, that was what I
it's the
was
same
saying.
scenario. Sorry, it's the same scenario for me still, Clive. You can still
Yes,
ensure that it would be seen as multi-let, and find out what the council would want for that to be the case, and ensure that the lease is written in such a way that it reflects that.
I'm now understanding what
Yeah,
you mean
yeah,
on both scores, and I
yeah.
think it's a matter of, yeah, couldn't
But
we?
Just to,
it's definitely good due diligence to ensure that at the outset, in
Yes,
my
yes,
opinion.
yeah,
for
absolutely.
me, I would probably go a step further. I mean, I think it's, Lorraine, your point is great. That kind of speaks off my point about being nice and just, I think that your council HMO licensing people would really appreciate you being proactive. And they'd say, okay, well, if we ensure this and we've got a paper trail and we'd see that you've got that. But
Planning, yeah, it's planning.
sorry, I thought you said it had planning and it was the
Yeah, no,
HMO
it's
license.
planning rather than licensing, isn't it? To ensure that it's multi-let. That's
True,
the
planning, yeah.
concern is planning rather than
Oh, you mean
licensing. Yeah,
for the ensuring it's multi-let? Okay,
yeah, yeah.
so I'm assuming it's got planning, but as you said, Clive, it's got no planning and it's got no license, and you don't need either in order to implement right now for 5 years. In 5 years' time, it comes out of that, and let's say it becomes Article 4, right?
That's the
And then what you're doing. So that my point is on, and similar to what I was saying to Helen, what's your horizon? If you want to have this as a legacy property, or you want to have it as a viable property for 20 years, then I would go a step further. I would go through these processes now, because if it's not Article 4, and it then becomes Article 4, or whatever. So I'd think on a longer horizon, and an appropriate horizon to what you want your investment to be. And it might be that you're spending a few thousands more right now, but you're giving yourself that option, rather than sort of depending on the goodwill of someone who's there that might not be there in 5 years' time.
no.
I
You'd
think
want
I
it
know what you're
in
saying.
writing.
You're
Yeah.
actually suggesting to do the planning and or licensing or both, even if I don't need it now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Which
Cool.
is what I've always said as well, Clive, isn't it? For me, if you're doing an HMO and you're working with a provider, I would still want my HMO to tick all HMO boxes
Absolutely,
and to be
yeah.
signed off as licensed in effect.
True,
Yeah.
true.
I think the licensing is not as important in this case,
No.
No,
because,
but for your space
sorry, just to
provisions, we're
say,
talking. Yeah.
yeah, just to say, the licensing is not as important in this particular case, but the planning is. So making
The
sure
funny
that,
thing is, though, Cunley, there is a catch-22 here. If the property is only for 6 beds and doesn't need planning, which it doesn't at the moment, unless I go for 7 beds, which I will do. But if hypothetically it was only 6 beds, they'd laugh at me applying for planning. They'd say, we can't process that. You don't need it, mate.
Well said.
keep your money. So
So
there
it's
is
not in an Article 4 area currently.
so that
Right.
yeah, exactly. So there is a catch-22 where great advice, but they would just say, "I'm sorry, we can't."
The
Sorry,
application is for nothing. Yeah, what are you applying for?
computer says no.
Yes, absolutely.
But I will do
Absolutely.
the due diligence and get
Yeah.
as much as I can confirmed.
Yeah, it is a pain. It is catch-22. It is difficult. But I think, if your intentions are long-term, then it's worth going through that pain.
Having the
And it might
foresight
really say,
now.
okay, let's up it to sui generis and then, and then do that. And that is a lot of work up front, but it'll give you a lot of
Comfort,
peace of mind.
comfort,
Peace of mind,
peace of mind.
absolutely.
Yeah,
Great
definitely.
question. Love that one. Thank you, Clive. Great. So, let's go back to Helen because I think you've been waiting, and then we'll go to Kieran. Was it Kieran or Daniel? Come on, Helen. How are you doing?
Hello again. I'm not sure if I've got myself confused now after what you were saying to Clive, because mine's similar. It's about a certificate of lawfulness. So I'm asking when should we apply for one, but actually we need to apply for the license anyway, because it's going to be 6 bedrooms. So I don't need the certificate of lawfulness and the license together, do I?
Is this for the same
No,
property?
this is for a different property.
Okay, tell us a bit about the property and where it is. And
It's in Sheerness. It's going to be 6 bedroom HMO. It's terraced.
Is it Article 4 or not?
No, it's not Article 4.
Okay.
is it likely to be Article 4 in the next few years? Is there a concentration of HMOs in that particular location?
There are becoming more of them, yes. So it's a possibility.
Close by areas are talking about going to Article 4.
But you can't, like we just said with Clive, it's a no compute if you're not going to apply for certificate of lawfulness when there's no Article 4 in place now, but you will need a license for sure.
Yeah.
That's 2 different departments, yeah?
Yes.
So you're going to have to apply for a HMO license.
Yes. Yeah.
Is it currently running as an HMO?
No, it's never been a HMO.
Right. Okay. So I think that there's no reason, because obviously if it was running as an HMO, you'd like to have as much proof that it has been running in order to acquire a certificate of lawfulness. But if Article 4 is coming, then you just need to make sure you've got all your ducks in a row for when Article 4 comes, and follow the process if and when it does, and make sure you've got the local knowledge, so that you understand that Article 4 is coming in. For example, Coventry, that it was still about over a year before I knew that Article 4 was coming in. For some reason, I hadn't talked to my planner for a while. So don't make sure because they have to give 2 years notice for an Article 4 provision to come into place.
Okay. Right. So just the license then.
Yeah.
You need the license, yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Brilliant. Okay, right.
Just
Who's
one
there?
little point. Just one little point. Tiny one.
Oh, hi, Clive.
I have heard that some areas that aren't Article 4 have designated certain roads as restricted. And has anyone heard of that? Yeah, you have to be careful, because just because it's not Article 4, part of your due diligence must be to check you're not on one of those restricted roads. I'm not sure what the term is called when they're restricted. Is it selective licensing, or is that something slightly different? Yeah.
Selective licensing is slightly different because it's not just for HMOs,
No,
it's
it
for
isn't.
the
It's
whole
very
of the private
correct.
rented sector, yeah.
But there are some, and it's a cheeky way of doing Article 4 without Article 4.
Additional licensing.
It could be, I'm not sure. Thank you.
Again, that it's going to vary so much from council to council, which is why it's so important to dig deep and to find out in your area exactly where these different restrictions are in place, isn't it? Totally.
So it's just again, I know we keep going on about it, but Article 4 is around planning and the planners. And
Yes.
there are certain things that they can put in place. You can have conservation areas. You can have certain streets that they just have a designation from the local plan, and it's designated as some sort of conservation or some sort of whatever, and there are restrictions that are in place, and that may or may not affect, for example, drainage, right? Sustainable drainage, because, if you're going to do something or put a car park in there. So there are all sorts of things, and that's why it can get complicated quite quickly. So being nice and trying to get helpful planning people is key. So
to the experts for that area
quite quickly.
Okay, I think we should be trying to wind down, Kunle.
Yeah, there's a couple more. So Daniel Thomas, can we get you on screen, please?
Hi, Daniel.
Hi,
Daniel.
Okay.
How you doing?
Not too bad, thank you.
Nice to see you.
Nice to meet you too.
What was your question?
I guess my question is, I remember you talking about the reason why is it buyer's market, and I'm still trying to figure out why it is a buyer's market. And I believe one of your points, I think it might have been the first one, was talking about the stamp duty. I'm not sure if that was what you said, but
Yes.
I'm just trying to understand why would the increase in stamp duty be the reason why it's a buyer's market?
Yeah, so I think, thank you for the question, first of all, and I'm glad to see you actually, because you're quite active in the chat, so it's good to see.
It's nice to put a face to your name, Daniel.
The stamp duty
or even your voice, actually, yeah.
So stamp duty becomes effective at a certain threshold. Depends on the properties you're buying, etc. But it becomes effective at a certain threshold. And what's happened is the government during COVID, they raised that threshold to encourage people to buy. And now they're bringing it down. So from 1st of April, that threshold where stamp duty land tax is effective has been lowered, right? So if you're a property within that sort of threshold, then it's lowered, and therefore as a buyer you would have to pay stamp duty land tax, and it would be more expensive for you to buy that property, and therefore people are kind of trying to get that property sold in Q1. It's actually probably a bit too late now, because unless you've got a wad of cash and you want to close something. So as a buyer, it's going to be more expensive depending on the purchase price of your property. Just look it up on gov.uk or check me out separately if you want to.
Lots of people are wanting to complete, aren't they, before the end of March, beginning of April, so that they have to pay less stamp duty.
So people are seeing that their property is being more expensive because there's more money going to the government. So they put it on market, and that's raised the number of properties in the marketplace. And people are, motivated sellers. Obviously, I think we talked to you about motivated sellers in the chat before, Daniel. And that, you might not think it because you think, okay, I really want this property. I put a lot of work into it. But there are motivated sellers out there, and there are a lot of deals out there. So don't get too emotionally attached. That's what I'd say. Does that answer your question, Daniel?
Yes. Thank you very much.
Great. No worries. Next was Christos, I believe.
What did I have a question?
That question.
Okay, no, did you have a question?
Do you have a question?
Or a comment?
I was just going to clarify a couple of points for Helen. One was she's got to make sure that the mortgage company is happy with that type of tenant, and also insurance, because it's a specialist insurance.
Yes.
If you don't get either of those right, you could be in quite a bit of trouble. And the other one for James, in Coventry, you've got 21 days to reapply for the license. But as long as you've filled in your application form and paid your fees, then you have a legal defense in law for not having an HMO license. It's the only defense. I don't know if he's still there, if he's frozen or.
Yeah.
For Leicester, yeah.
Yeah.
No,
No, that's great.
his face has disappeared, but.
Great point. Great point. So yeah, you were making good points in the chat. Sorry, I thought it was a question. And actually the same for yourself, Glenn. Glenn says, I believe, I'm going to just read out what you said, Glenn, saving the brother. I believe in Scotland you have a 28-day period to provide the correct forms / info on a transfer of an HMO license. If you fall out of this immediately and then you don't have the authority to have the HMO license, and you must go through the full process. But it's a bit stricter in Scotland. Yeah, thank you, Glenn. That makes sense.
Okay.
I think there's another one that says, what trainers do you suggest? And there was a bit of a cheeky answer there. Lorraine, in this guise, are you a trainer? I think go to Lorraine, James. Lorraine will give you.
James.
Right.
Right.
Thank
okay.
you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Session. Hopefully, everybody's gained a little bit of something and been able to ask any questions they've got.
Well, we're all on. I mean, hopefully, we're all on the chat. If not, then look me up. I can add you to the chat. Give us your feedback. What do you think? Was there anything we missed? Did you disagree with our 4 points in terms of due diligence? And if you got any great deals that fit our strategies, come to me and Lorraine, no worries.
And if you've got any ideas about what you'd like us to discuss on future webinars, that would be great too. We are going to go back to having guests, aren't we?
Yes.
People who are kind of smashing it in our community and doing really well.
And we should think about the deal analyzer. We have a couple of people saying yes to the deal analyzer. So again, tell us if you think it might be worth us kind of putting something together. So yeah, brilliant. Yeah. Good to see you guys.
All right.
Okay, thank you.
Have
Good
a
night,
lovely
everybody.
evening.
Have a good evening.
Good night.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.